can you guys give up your living space for me? It's really cramped with 3 kids, you know? Out of the blue, my sister-in-law showed up at our 2-family home, where my husband and I were living with his parents, bringing her kids along. Both my husband and I were dumbfounded by my sister-in-law's outrageous demand. Lost for words, we were even more shocked when my in-laws took her side. The space you guys are living in is too big for just the 2 of you, isn't it? It's only right as human beings to give it up for this girl and her 3 growing kids. You 2 would be just fine in a storage room. I couldn't take their selfishness anymore. I was at the end of my rope. I needed to bring down divine retribution on them for their selfishness. Determined internally, I responded with a blank expression on my face. All right, as you wish, my husband and I will leave this place. With that, I took my husband's hand and we moved out of the 2-family home to a modest apartment. 2 few days after moving, I received a call from my sister-in-law on my smartphone and instinctively answered. What pierced my ears was the desperate shouting of my sister-in-law. What is this all about? I just got a notice to vacate from the real estate agency. Do you know anything about this? What did you do? And that was my revenge against them who had taken over our home. My name is Emily. I'm a remote worker in my 30s, living with my husband, Michael. We met through a blind date. I had been a remote worker for a long time before getting married and not having many opportunities to meet men, so my worried parents set up the blind date without telling me. Initially, I was confused and thought it was none of their business, but the man I met was surprisingly pleasant. We hit it off as we found common topics to talk about, and that led to dating and eventually marriage. The man who became my husband is somewhat timid, but he's a kind person and very reliable. For someone like me, often described as assertive yet inflexible, he has a lot of qualities that I lack. Life with him was going smoothly. His parents lived in the next town over. We weren't living together, but we had a good relationship, occasionally staying in touch and being invited to their house. A few years into our marriage, my mother-in-law started suggesting that we live together. We're getting on in years, and when I think about the future, I get anxious. Hey, if it's not too much trouble, would you like to live together? She said it lightly, without pressuring us, but the in-laws started bringing up the topic of living together more frequently. I understood their concerns about living alone at an old age, and thought living with them might be a good idea since we had a good relationship. We had a good relationship. However, my husband seemed to have some reservations. Michael, are you against living with your parents? No, I think it should be fine. His indecisive attitude was typical, so I didn't think much of it. Little I know that this would lead to such a catastrophe. One day, while living a peaceful life, tragedy struck. My parents were involved in a car accident and passed away suddenly. But the suddenness of it all left me in a daze. Being an only child, with no close cousins or relatives to rely on, I had no time to grieve as I had to arrange the funeral and deal with other matters. My grandparents had already passed away, so I inherited all of my parents' assets, including a significant amount of money, as well as their house and land. However, I couldn't bring myself to be happy about it, due to the grief of losing my parents and the busyness of handling their affairs. My kind husband supported me through it all, staying by my side. And my in-laws also empathized with me, as I couldn't easily express my feelings. Emily, it's okay to cry when you're sad. You suddenly lost your parents, and it's natural to be sad. That's their impressioners. There's a lot to do. I know, but you need to accept your feelings first. Hearing my mother-in-law say this made me realize that I hadn't cried since my parents passed away. And finally, I was able to cry my heart out. After my parents' funeral and settling the inheritance matters, my in-laws started to visit our house more frequently and bring us gifts. If it bothers you, feel free to tell us, okay? My mother-in-law said this with a wry smile, but I felt truly saved by the presence of my caring in-laws. Gradually, I came to think of them almost like my own parents. Then one day, as usual, while having tea and chatting at our house, my mother-in-law brought up the topic of living together again after a long time. Hey, about living together. Even though you have Michael, you must feel lonely without your parents, Emily. Would you seriously consider living with us? We really want to live with you and Michael. Of course, it's fine if you want to wait until you're ready, but could you start thinking seriously about it? And their earnest proposal warmed my heart. After they left, I consulted with my husband, who had just returned from work. Your parents suggested living together again. I have to deal with my parents' house anyway, and I was thinking that maybe it's a good opportunity to start living together in a new house built for all of us. So what do you think, Michael? Well, yeah, I'm sure it will be fine. let's do it. My husband seemed a bit concerned about something, but in the end, he accepted my wish. From there, we conveyed our willingness to live together to my in-laws and started preparations for it. The house I inherited from my parents was old and had concerns regarding earthquake resistance, so we decided to demolish it and build a new duplex for us to live together with my in-laws on the same land. It cost a considerable amount to demolish the old house and build the new one, but fortunately, we were able to cover the costs with the inheritance left by my parents. Sure, a few months later, a new duplex registered in my name was completed. My in-laws liked the new house, and I felt relieved and started our new life living together with a fresh mind. At first, living together with my in-laws went smoothly. However, gradually, I started to feel a coldness in their attitude toward us. "Hey, Emily, don't vacuum at such a late hour. It's incredibly noisy. You're home all day. You can clean anytime. You need to be more considerate of us in your daily life." At first, it was mostly comments about our different living rhythms and noise, but gradually, they started to make more and more critical remarks about household chores. "It was nice of you to invite us to dinner, but this food, it's quite plain, isn't it? Could you make something more extravagant next time? Are you lacking in hospitality? I wonder what kind of education your parents gave you." Like, their cold words pierced through my heart. However, I thought it was due to my own immaturity. They must be scolding me for my own good. I decided to bear it and accept their harsh words. Even so, their sudden change from being kind and warm to this cold attitude gradually started to bring me down. When I vented to my husband, it seemed like he had an idea of what was going on. "So that's what's happening. No, Emily, it's not your fault. You're doing your best managing the house while working, and you're the ideal wife for me. So don't let anything they say bother you, okay?" My husband's smile and kind words healed my wounded heart a bit. However, he also seemed to find it difficult to speak up or go against his parents, so the fundamental issues remained unresolved. Gradually, the mistreatment from my in-laws escalated from words and attitudes to financial matters. They stopped contributing to the living expenses and utility bills that we used to split. "You and Michael are both working, so you have money. It's outrageous for you to ask us, who are living on our pensions, to pay. Don't you think it's cruel? When did you become such an unfilial child?" With such accusations thrown at us, we had no choice but to bear the financial burden from my in-laws as well. Then one day, a shocking incident occurred. My husband cheated on me, so I divorced him. "So let us live here with you." My sister-in-law barked into our house, saying this, bringing her 3 young children with her. My husband and I were perplexed, but my in-laws welcomed them with arms. "This is your home too. There's no way we'd refuse. We're actually thrilled to live with our grandchildren. That husband of yours was terrible for cheating. You must be exhausted. Come in and rest first." "Yeah, thank you. Excuse us for intruding." Despite living under the same roof, my husband and I weren't even asked when my in-laws decided to happily invite my sister-in-law and their kids to stay. If it were just a short visit, that'd be one thing, but to move them in without asking us, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Feeling uneasy, I cautiously approached my mother-in-law to talk. This sudden decision to live together with my sister-in-law and her kids, it's a bit abrupt." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law looked like she took it as me being against living with my sister-in-law. Glaring at me with a stern look, she retorted in a cold voice, "What? Are you saying she should be left to wander the streets after her husband left her, even with her young kids? I can't believe how cold-hearted you can be." She spat out these words. Panicking, I tried to explain myself, but she was having none of it. "No, that's not what I meant. I just that if we are going to live together, I wish you would have asked for our consent. What's the difference? You just don't want to live with them, that's clear. Besides, they are going to live in our part of the house, so we don't need your agreement. Just mind your own business." Saying that, she firmly shut the door leading to my in-laws' living space, leaving me standing there utterly flabbergasted. I was left feeling stunned by the irrational behavior and justifications of my sister-in-law and in-laws. Living with my sister-in-law and her kids, which started so abruptly, was frankly a nightmare. Her kids would freely enter our living space, running around, making noise, and sometimes breaking things. They didn't listen no matter how many times we told them not to come into our room, and my requests for my sister-in-law to scold them were bluntly dismissed. "What? Can you not interfere in my family's matters? And don't you dare scold my kids. It's not that I'm scolding them, I just want them to learn some basic manners, like not going into other people's living spaces carelessly and not making noise in someone else's house. That's rich coming from you? Living in this house, thanks to Mom and Dad, and now acting all high and mighty. This with her face turning red with anger. She shut the door leading to my in-laws' space once again. It seems she's misunderstood that the house is owned by my in-laws, but I couldn't find the courage to correct her. In the end, nothing changed about the kids' behavior. They would barge into my workroom, disturbing my work, making both my professional and personal life chaotic. I was slowly losing my mind due to the daily commotion. Observing the kids, I noticed something. At first glance, they seemed well-dressed, but upon closer inspection, I saw their teeth were riddled with cavities. Their nails were bitten down and rough. It was clear they weren't being properly taken care of. Together with their lack of manners, it was apparent that my sister-in-law wasn't taking proper care of them. And my in-laws, perhaps too soft on their grandchildren, didn't seem to be correcting them at all. Ever since my sister-in-law and her kids came, our lives have been turned upside down. I'm really at my limit. Exhausted, I opened up to my husband, who finally shared his long-standing concerns. It seems that my in-laws have always favored my sister-in-law, leaving my husband feeling neglected for a long time. However, my in-laws have a great public image, never letting anyone catch a glimpse of the discord within the family or their own unpleasant traits, always appearing as a happy family of 4. After getting a job, my husband moved out and started living on his own, and that's when his parents' attitudes softened, showing more kindness and consideration. This kind demeanor extended to me after marrying him, leading us to believe they had turned over a new leaf. But since we started living together, my in-laws' attitude has been just like when I was a kid. While they dote on their daughter, they don't care about my husband at all. Instead, they look down on him and treat him coldly. This behavior and attitude became more pronounced around the time they accepted their daughter moving in, and my husband realized that his parents' true nature hadn't changed since his childhood. It seems that whether or not they're living with us determines how my in-laws behave outwardly. If we're not living together, they treat everyone nicely with a perfect facade, but their true colors show when we live under the same roof. I'm sorry for not realizing this sooner and making you go through such a hard time. My husband said, his eyes teeming with tears. Hearing this confession from my husband was a shock to me. I could never have imagined that the kind in-laws I knew before we moved in were just a facade and that they had been looking down on me all along. I had started to suspect something from their recent attitudes, but hearing the truth made it all the more heartbreaking. However, my husband was a victim just like me, even though he kept silent about it. I couldn't bring myself to be angry at him. Thank you for telling me. It's not your fault, Michael, so please don't apologize. Just understanding the true nature of my in-laws, I suddenly felt the inferiority I had towards them vanish. From then on, I secretly began preparing to leave and escape from my in-laws and sister-in-law whenever necessary. A few weeks later, on a holiday, as my husband and I were relaxing in the living room, my sister-in-law made an outrageous suggestion. The place where Mom and Dad live is too cramped. We can't let the kids live freely there. So, how about you give us your living space? Wait, are you telling us to leave this house? Stunned by my sister-in-law's absurd demand, both my husband and I were taken aback. My sister-in-law just snorted in derision. Oh, even a fool like you gets it. That's right, I'm telling you to leave this house. As I was at a loss for words, my mother-in-law appeared behind my sister-in-law. The space you guys are living in is too big for just the two of you, isn't it? It's only natural as human beings to give it to this girl here, who has 3 growing kids, don't you think? My mother-in-law said, smirking. I couldn't hold back any longer and argued back. That's absurd. This is our home too. Where are you telling us to live? I don't care about that. Maybe you can live in a storage room. That would be perfect for just the two of you. My mother-in-law said dismissively, while my sister-in-law eagerly agreed. I felt my patience snap at their audacity. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to mete out divine punishment to these women who did whatever they pleased. Determined in my heart, I responded with a neutral expression. Fine, we'll leave. But we can't move out right away, so please give us a week. We'll be out of here just like you want in a week's time. Saying that, I took Michael's hand and turned our backs to my in-laws and sister-in-law, who were squealing with delight. Since we were alone, Michael looked at me with a frustrated expression and apologized. Emily, I'm sorry. I couldn't say anything. Hearing him say that, I revealed my plan to him. It's okay, I got everything planned out. Actually, Michael was surprised, but he agreed to my proposal. We then proceeded with our moving preparations, and a week later we faced my in-laws for the last time. As you wished, we're leaving this house. In return, we're cutting off all ties with you and your daughter, starting today. My husband declared our decision to sever ties, but my in-laws didn't seem to care at all. Could be gone. You are a failure of a son to begin with. You're nothing to us. I feel so refreshed now that the nuisances are gone. This house is finally just for us. Ignoring my triumphant in-laws, Michael and I left the two-family house we had lived in. We moved into a rental apartment we had arranged temporarily. Despite its small size, it was a peaceful and quiet space where we began our life together, just the two of us. A few days after moving, I was working from home when I decided to take a break and checked my personal phone, only to notice a series of missed calls from my in-laws and sister-in-law. As I was wondering what was happening, my sister-in-law called again. I answered without thinking, and her shouting voice pierced through my ears. "Hey, what's going on? I just got a message from the real estate agent saying we have to leave. Do you know anything about this? What did you do?" In reality, ever since my husband confided in me about his parents' true nature, I had been preparing to sell the house we lived in with them. I had secretly requested estimates from several real estate agents, selected one, and when they announced they were evicting us, I went through with the sale. Although the house was newly built and a two-family home, the assessment of the property was negotiated down. However, the land was prime real estate, so we were able to get a decent amount for it. As a result, I was able to let go of the land and the two-family home that I inherited from my parents and recoup a considerable amount of money. That's outrageous. This house belongs to Mom and Dad, right? It's ridiculous that you could sell it on your own. To my sister-in-law, who seemed to be under the mistaken impression that the house was in our parents' name, I told the truth. No, this house was built under my name, so it was mine in both name and reality. I was only renting a part of the living space to your mother and father. Well, now it's someone else's house since I've sold it. What did you say? The house wasn't under Michael's name. We thought it was under his name, so it would naturally belong to us as his parents. You deceived us, you liar. When you said you were leaving the house, normally you should have over the ownership to us. What an ungrateful, deceitful person. To my in-laws and sister-in-law were screaming and hurling abuse. But to them, I retorted, that's an awful thing to say. You all made your own assumptions. I simply disposed of my own property. So please hurry up and leave. With that, I hung up the phone, ignoring my still yelling sister-in-law and her family. The in-laws, having received an eviction notice from the real estate agent, had no choice but to comply and reluctantly vacated the new home. Rumor has it that, having nowhere to live, the in-laws and sister-in-law's family started living in an apartment. However, the children's pranks and noise were so disruptive that the neighbors constantly complained. Due to the numerous complaints and the severity of the situation, they were eventually forced to move out. The landlord couldn't stay silent, and it seems they were kicked out of the apartment in less than a month. Evictions, once again without a place to live. My desperate in-laws stormed into my husband's workplace. "Bring out Michael. We are his family, and we need to talk to him," they exclaimed. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the receptionist at the company held my sister-in-law and her family back while discreetly contacting my husband. After receiving the call, my husband explained the situation to his boss, called the police, and had my in-laws and sister-in-law restrained by the police when they arrived. It was after the police arrived that my husband showed himself to his parents. Seeing my husband, my in-laws and sister-in-law, even while being taken away by the police, resisted fiercely and yelled at him. "Hell, you ungrateful brat! Because of you, we lost our home. Take responsibility." And calling the police, "Are you out of your mind? How could you treat your own family like this?" Facing his desperate parents and sister, my husband calmly declared, "I don't have parents or a sister. I used to have people who were my parents and sister, but I cut ties with them a few days ago. You and I are complete strangers now. I simply asked the police to handle the disturbance in our company's lobby." Is there a problem with that? At my husband's words, my in-laws were left speechless, while my sister-in-law, until the very end, screamed, "You traitor! Out, you heartless man!" However, she was eventually shoved into a police car and taken away. While my in-laws and sister-in-law were being interrogated, we met once with my sister-in-law's husband and his parents. Right from what we heard, it turned out that my sister-in-law was the one having an affair. Moreover, it was her husband who had asked for the divorce, and they weren't officially divorced yet. On considering the whole police situation, my sister-in-law's husband demanded a divorce again. Reluctantly, my sister-in-law agreed, and their divorce was finally finalized. After the divorce, the custody of the children went to my sister-in-law's ex-husband. My sister-in-law's ex-husband, after taking custody of the kids, seemed to have straightened them out with the help of his parents. I've heard they've become very well-behaved children now. After everything that happened, my in-laws and sister-in-law only received a stern warning and were released, and it appears they have started living in a rundown, cheap apartment. It turns out that while living with us, they had been spending lavishly on luxury items while making us pay for living expenses and utilities, which resulted in them having almost no savings left. My sister-in-law, unaware of the situation, was furious. What the heck is this? I wasn't informed about any of this. I was counting on your money for our living expenses. Alimony and living expenses? That's none of our business. You're the one who cheated and got a divorce. You should pay your own alimony. You have no one to blame but yourself, you damn old hag. Even my in-laws, who used to spoil my sister-in-law, seem to have run out of patience. Now, they reportedly argue about money every day. It seems like my sister-in-law has long since lost contact with her affair partner, leaving her with no one to rely on. Out of necessity, she started working a part-time job. However, she seems to be causing a lot of trouble at her workplace, and it's only a matter of time before she gets fired. Despite all of this, my in-laws haven't managed to shake their habit of wasteful spending. They're scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck, with no hope of saving any money. Their financial situation is only getting worse, and they're even close to being evicted from their apartment due to unpaid rent. Hearing about the downward spiral of my in-laws through the grapevine, my husband and I used the money from selling the land and two-family house to buy a small, cozy single-family home. Together with my sweet husband, I am now living a peaceful and happy life every day.